it all in, one by one. Poet beats.
Greetings, beloved. Hey, y'all. Listen, we are back again with the People Power Podcast with myself, Reverend Michael Malcolm, founder and executive director of the People's Justice Council and Alabama Interfaith Power and Light, and my special, super fantabulous co-host, and that the sister Lindsay Harper. And then we've got, in addition to just a remarkable scholar and just extremely impactful advocate for justice, and that Dr. LaToria Whitehead with us today. Listen, yo, I'm going to step back because I'm just eavesdropping on this conversation between two girlfriends on today, two brilliant sisters, especially on this Black History Month. So I want to let them really just show empower. And every now and then I may step in and make some commentary, but I really want to hear what they've got. So I'm going to step back now, and I'm just going to pass it over to Sister Lizzie. And Lizzie, you take it from here.
Thank you, Rev. I appreciate you. Very excited to be here for another episode of the People Power Podcast. I'm excited this particular episode because I've got my friend, my colleague, Dr. LaToria Whitehead with us today. And I'm really excited to be able to, introduce you to folks, for those who don't know you, and kind of get an idea of your career, your life, your growth and development when it comes to environmental justice. A lot of people don't necessarily know what environmental justice means, or all the things all the different ways you can, engage with environmental justice. There's so many different ways, and sometimes even I forget. I'm talking to you, LaToria. It's like, I guess you can do that too. I guess you can do that too. So, if you could please just, introduce yourself briefly and just let folks know a little bit about you. And then I'm going to ask you a little bit about where you come from, but just a little bit about you first.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I'm so excited to be here with you today, my friend. You and the Reverend, I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm humbled. So a little bit about me. Well, I know you said that you were going to be posing some questions. Currently, I'm the CEO and founder of my consulting firm, the LS Whitehead Group, LSWG. I also am a adjunct professor for Spelman College. I teach in the political science department. I teach environmental policy and politics, and I integrate environmental justice into that. I also teach the legislative process as well. By training, I am a political scientist, and so that's where that comes from. Before teaching, I also, at Spelman, my first professor gig was at Clark Atlanta University, the illustrious Clark Atlanta University. They gave me my first chance at being a professor, and so I taught there first for a semester. I've also taught at Georgia State University, environmental health, and Atlanta Metropolitan College. I taught American government for over 5 years. And so that is what I do currently. I run my consulting firm, and I'm also a professor, and I am a deputy editor for the Environmental Justice Journal. And that's what I do.
Well,
right now.
I gotta say, I'm out of breath from all the things you just mentioned. I heard academia, I heard policy.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I heard government in there. I heard entrepreneurship in there. So let's try and unravel some of these things and kind of figure out kind of like your trajectory, how you came to be like who you are today. And again, I really want folks to understand like the journey of justice, the journey of environmental justice, of policy, of, wanting to share information, really to improve the world that's around us and from your vantage point. So tell us a little bit about like where you're from and like what school did you go to? Tell us about Dr. Whitehead from back in the day.
Okay. Okay. So I am originally from Jacksonville, Florida. And I'm originally from Jacksonville, Florida. That is where I grew up. And I left Jacksonville, Florida when I was 27 years old and moved here in the Atlanta, Georgia area. But while in Jacksonville, Florida, of course, I attained my bachelor in health science from the University of North Florida. I worked at the Duval County Health Department, and that was really my first connection to public health. When I was getting my bachelor's degree, I actually started off as a pre-med major. I wanted to be a different kind of doctor. I wanted to be a physician. And that didn't work out for me. I just got tired. And so anyway, I went from there to, pre-med. I went from there to being health science. So I got a bachelor's in health science, and I got a job at the health department. And I didn't know what I was going to do, what I was doing. I just know that I needed a job. And so I got that job, and I started off as a health educator, and I was a health educator, in a lead poisoning prevention program. And we would go out in the community. We would educate different people in the communities. And I was introduced to this term called environmental justice by by the director of the health department at that time. Well, he's the director for the environmental health department at that time. And so he introduced me to this subject called EJ. And I just, I became, I didn't understand it. I was trying to comprehend it more. And the comprehension was basically trying to understand, like, why this was happening. So I was naive to it because I just thought that, well, this shouldn't be happening. All they have to do is this, or all they have to do is that. I didn't understand the intricacies of this injustice that was happening. And so the more I read, the more I began to, really teach myself and try to understand. And so I began to read more books and articles and things of that nature. So at this time, I am still in Jacksonville, Florida, working for the health department, being a health educator, going out to different communities, talking about childhood lead poisoning, but understanding this, looking at this term of EJ, understanding the community that I am in. I look like this community. We look like this community. We are this community.
Right.
And I didn't realize that. And so after I got my bachelor's degree, I decided that I wanted to get a master's in public health. That would be, good for me to attain that, to go further in public health. So the more, how that is, the more the more you want to grow, the more you want to, become educated. And so I decided that I want to get a master's in public health. And that's when I decided to apply for a fellowship here and at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. And with that, well, before that, I actually decided that I needed to go to school. So I applied for Mercer University School of Medicine. And I got into Mercer University School of Medicine, but then I needed a job. So at the time, my son, he is 2 years old, right? And so I am still in Jacksonville. I've got accepted to this program, but I do need a job. I do need a place to stay. I need my son to be settled as well. And so I got into the program, but I was doing classes online. So I'm still in Jacksonville doing classes online. And my health department person who hired me, he came to Atlanta for a conference, and he met one of the directors at CDC, Dr. Sharonda Buchanan, and he said, "Hey, I got a sister back in Jacksonville. She's ABCDNE. She needs a job. She got into this program." And so I got on the phone, with Dr. Buchanan, and she said, "Next time you're here, let me know, so we could, talk about maybe a fellowship." So I said, "Mom, I need some money to get to Atlanta." So I could, because I was broke, so I can get there and, talk to this person so I can get a job. And so made my way here, and I got on as a fellow at CDC. And so, with that, end up moving into, Atlanta, getting my master's of public health while I was at CDC, and then going further to, of course, CAU. And so while I was also,
But can I
sorry.
ask you a really quick question? Because you've laid
Yes.
out a lot, and I'm
Oh, I'm
curious.
sorry.
No, you're fine. But there are a couple of things that you said that I wanted to kind of take a pause on for a second, because I'm
Okay.
really wanting people to be able to like go along like with your journey. And so
Okay.
you mentioned, like public health, and you mentioned like, health. I think you said the health department, just like,
Yes.
but health in general and wanting to be a physician. And so what was it about like public health that that piqued your interest? And
Mm-hmm.
when did you know, or what was the thing when you really began to realize it, like, about yourself? Like, I also look like the communities and I'm like working to serve. Like, what were some of those
Yeah.
key moments that made you know that you were heading you wanted to shift your direction a little bit, but like going towards
Yeah.
public health and environmental justice was the right direction for you?
That's a great question. So going back when I worked at the health department, so first off, I started off as a pre-med major. So health has always been that, just had that connection, wanted to do that anyway. Always wanted to do health. My mother is she's also a medical assistant. And so she's in that health as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, that was always in me. When I when I decided to, shift, from pre-med, I knew that I wanted to do health. I just didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I thought I was going to be a pharmaceutical rep. That was not for me. And so when I got the job at the health department, I really had no idea what I was getting into. Let me tell you this. I didn't even apply for this job. Now that I'm remembering, this was such a long time ago. So what happened is the health department director, he basically was recruiting people to come out and, you know, be into this. He wanted to build this department, and he came to my grandmother's house. And my grandmother told him about me.
I didn't see that coming. He came to your grandmother's house. Okay.
Yeah, I forgot about that. You bringing up these memories, but this is good. And so he came to my grandmother's house, and she was like, "This man stopped by here today, and such and such and such." And I told him what you were doing. I was like, "Okay." And so I called, and I was like, "Yeah, I need a job. I got my bachelor's degree. I had just had my son. And so, he was really young, and I needed a job. And, I got my bachelor's in health science. So I said, great, I would love to, do whatever you want me to do. I had no experience. And so I started off at that health educator. And so to go back to your question, I love being in the community, in the neighborhoods. I'm a very social person, as you know, Lindsay. And
Mhm.
so I like, being in the communities, and I like talking to people. I like understanding their stories. So I was going to these clinics, and I was educating, the young women on childhood lead poisoning and getting
Mhm.
their child tested for lead. But while I was sitting in the communities, they were also telling me about these other issues that they had with, I have
Mhm.
2 jobs. I'm a mother of 3. I don't have this or that. How am I going to get there? And so I could relate to them. I've always had 2 parents in my house, but I was a Head Start child. My mother had me at a very young age. All right. And so I could relate to being in the same community that I was going on and educating them. I stayed right around the corner. And
Mhm.
so I could relate to the issues, and I may not have had those same issues of, that they had, but because I came from these same neighborhoods and this somewhat of this same culture, I could understand those issues even more. So
Mhm.
for me, to take me through the avenue of environmental justice has always been very personal to me. I
Mhm.
don't feel like I picked it. I feel like it picked me, because this was not my plan at all. It was not my plan
I
at
feel
all.
that's what
And
everybody
so,
says. Everybody says that, like,
yes,
who gets into environmental justice on purpose? It's like you kind of fall in,
right,
back into it, you know what I'm saying? And then once you're in,
right.
it's like, how can I leave? Right.
How can I leave? Right.
Yeah.
So it was personal for me from the beginning. So hearing those stories and educating them, and then I have that, and then I have the health director coming to me saying, "Hey, by the way, have you ever heard of environmental justice?" And he did it so casually, and it was such a heavy thing. I was like, wow. And I was like, okay, where I live at, this shouldn't be happening in our neighborhood. I shouldn't be hearing the railroad tracks at night, and we're waking up in the middle of the night and you just got to go back to sleep. You don't have sidewalks, in my neighborhood where you can, go out and feel safe to walk or run. The same things I talk about today, the green space, it's lacking all these things. And of course, then we didn't call it green space, but I'm seeing these things, and I'm putting these things together, and I'm like, this is my neighborhood. I'm talking to these young women, and I'm learning this about them, that personal side of public health. And then I'm also learning about the other part of my ear, that's environmental justice. He's telling me about this. I'm reading these books, and it became very personal for me. And by that time, I couldn't grapple away from it. I needed to learn more. I needed to, and the more I learned, the more I felt like, okay, I need to do more. I need to see what I can do to help. So it was always very personal for me. So that's how I got into that path of EJ.
Interesting. And so you told us how you got to Atlanta, and how
Yes.
you started. So it sounds like the CDC was the first job, the Centers
Mm-hmm.
for Disease Control was
Mm-hmm.
your first job in Atlanta. Is that right?
Yes. CDC was my very first job.
Okay. And
Yes.
and just for people's edification, can you tell folks a little bit about the CDC and like, it's federal, right? Like, can you just tell folks a little bit
Yes.
about the CDC and how, I guess, and how environmental justice connects with the CDC, please?
Yeah, CDC is a federal, and we know federal is a national level, national government, and so CDC is a federal public health agency, and its job is to do many things, but its main job is to be able to monitor public health, be able to alleviate disease, be able to monitor disparity, and try to I'm not going to say alleviate, but get rid of disparity. When we say disparities, things that are unequal when they don't have to be. You have one population bearing more than their share of of chronic disease, of pollution, of bad air, of bad water, of cancer, of asthma, of things of that nature. So a huge part of CDC's job is to monitor and help alleviate public health problems, public health issues, research. And of course, CDC is huge on research and doing different things to alleviate public health issues and educating the world on these things too. CDC also influences policy. CDC is not a regulatory agency like your Environmental Protection Agency is a regulatory agency, but CDC does influence policy. And so that was my first job working for the CDC.
And so what did you do like for the CDC, and where does what are some of the things you like learned about environmental justice, about yourself in the context of CDC?
Hmm. So when I first started off at CDC, okay, so now I'm in Atlanta and I am attending Mercer University School of Medicine in Macon. And I'm driving out there and I'm a fellow at CDC at the time. I was on a fellowship for a year and a half, and that's while I was getting my master's degree. And I got out of Mercer, I graduated, and then I became an FTE like the semester right after.
What's
When
an
I first
FTE?
started off, I'm sorry, a full-time employee.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Got it. So when I first started, well, I got my master's in public health, and my focus was community health. And I wrote my thesis on environmental justice and Head Start mothers because my mother was a Head Start mother. And so
Mm-hmm.
again, it's personal for me. That hit home for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Right.
And so now I got my master's degree. I have my first full-time employment job at CDC. So that means I have benefits, and I am a regular employee. I'm no longer a temporary fellow after a year and a half. When I first started off at CDC, I worked in birth defects. Yes, I worked in
Yes.
birth defects. And I didn't stay there long. I stayed there probably like a year and a half. I was doing, again, health education. I had health education background from health department. And so now I'm in birth defects at CDC. I'm doing health education for a year and a half. And then I got into the National Center for Environmental Health.
Mm.
And then I stayed there that was the majority of where I was at in my tenure at CDC. I stayed there for probably over 10 years. I was there and there for a while. And then I got into um I'm sorry, I was there for 18 and a half years, and I'm trying to remember my tenure at CDC. So when I got into the National Center for Environmental Health, I worked at the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Program, and then I got another position as an environmental justice officer. And then after I came out of there, I got into a program for indigenous communities. And then I went back into, no, and then that was my last position before going into a detail. So to go back to your question, most of my career at CDC was in the National Center for Environmental Health, where I was a public health advisor, where we oversaw state state programs basically there. And then I got a position as an environmental justice officer, and that position was created for me. And in that position, I was really tasked with trying to really create environmental justice activities around in the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And also we were trying to create an office at CDC as well when I was an environmental justice officer. And yeah. And so then I went back to another position. And then my last position, I was in detail. I was on a detail for the Department of Health and Human Services, where myself and two other colleagues came together to try to create an Office of Environmental Justice. That was during the Biden administration. But going back to your question, which was what did I learn in the 10-year at CDC?
What were some like your key takeaways and experiences and things you learned about yourself?
So key takeaways when I was at CDC, when I first started off, I was very happy, of course, to be there. I think CDC does a lot. I learned a lot. I worked with a lot of brilliant, amazing people. And it was always, always a sense of learning. And, initially when I got there, I was a sponge, taking in a lot of information. There's not a lot of training. They kind of put you out there and say, okay, kind of like do it. And I'm a quick learner, so I didn't, have too much of a problem with that. But the more, I experienced these things, the more I learned, the more I wanted to do more. I wanted to do more. That's what prompted me to do a PhD, right? Because I was still in this environmental justice mode. So after I got out of the birth defects, I was in environmental health. I wanted to partner programs with community-based organizations. I wanted to partner state programs with environmental justice community-based organizations. So I was always trying to implement what I knew into CDC. In my mind, I figured that if I go back to school and I'm at the federal level and I can attain the highest degree that you can attain, a PhD, and understand public policy in that sense, I can really do something. I can really move the needle. I can really help people. And so the more I learned that that was not happening in a sense of where I needed to be gratified and where it made me feel good about helping people. Federal government is very administrative, right? And so there's what I learned is there's a lot of limitation, and working for social justice, environmental justice is social justice at the end of the day. That's what it is. And so there's a lot of limitation, and trying to advance and move forward in social justice and working for a federal agency, there's a lot of censorship. So there's only so much I can say. There's only so much I can write. And I love a sense of freedom. I love a sense of freedom. And I've always had a job where I can have some type of freedom in what I do. And so that became just very limiting for me as the years went by. It just started to kind of squeeze in on me. And so after I got my PhD, I got a PhD from Clark Atlanta University, illustrious CAU. And with that, I became a political scientist. And poli-sci is everything. Poli-sci is racism, it's public health in connection to racism and the policy. It's so many different things. And so as I learned more about what I wanted to know and what I wanted to really do, I became more disattached from CDC. So I began to feel like I was like limited in what I was doing. I learned a lot. I grew a lot, and I so appreciate my 18 and a half years at CDC, because it has really, there are things that I do now. Of course, that I've taken all that experience into what I do now, but there's also little things like, the writing and the editing, and make sure things are perfect in a sense, because the federal government, anything CDC puts out, hey, it needs to look perfect. I still have that skill set with me today, so I appreciate that. But what I learned about myself is I felt that I was limited, and what I could do. The more I learned, and then after I got my PhD, it was like, oh man, I knew so much about our history and our culture and public policy and how these things came about. And then working for the federal government, there was just a lot of censorship in that. And I knew that I was not going to, I knew that I wasn't going to retire from there per se. I just didn't know exactly how I wanted to go about. And that's what I learned about myself. I learned that I need the freedom to really help people in a way that is fitting and that really makes me feel good at the end of the day. And I don't want to be held, in that box.
So, Doc, let me ask you this. How would you label or how would you define environmental justice? And then in addition to, why is it important for us to know about environmental justice? Uh, why is it important for our communities to know about
To know about
environmental
it.
justice?
I would describe environmental justice as an attainment, an accomplishment, right? And I say that because there is an injustice that's there before you can actually get to the justice. When we talk about social justice, when we talk about justice in any kind of way, there's something that we need, right? There's something that we're trying to seek, trying to gain, trying to accomplish. So when we connect that in terms of the environment, it is beyond your traditional environmentalism. It is beyond your let's make sure we look at, the birds and the trees, what one may call your traditional environmentalism, right? And so we're looking at quality of life issues that are connected to disparity when there is one population bearing more than their share of environmental hazards when they don't have to versus another population because of systemic racism, because I am living in a certain neighborhood, because I am living, in that certain zip code, because I am a certain race. It doesn't mean that I should have to bear more than my share of pollution, of bad, air, bad water. I should also have space, green space, to go out and feel safe to walk in my environment, to have sidewalks in my environment. I should also be free to do things without being feeling like I am being harassed by police and things of that nature, by different authorities. That's also connected to environmental injustice. Environmental injustice is, when we look at these certain physical environments and these what we call the built environment, which is your neighborhood, and we look at food insecurity. How far is your nearest vegetables, and where you can get your nearest grocery store where you can get fresh fruits and fresh vegetables? How far is that, from you? Is it 20 miles away? Is it 10 miles away? Or do you have more check cashing stores in your neighborhood? Do you have more dollar stores in your neighborhood? Food insecurity is also a part of attaining what we call environmental justice. So when we talk about the environment in this sense, we are talking about your physical environment. We're also talking about your built environment, and we're talking about your social and your cultural environment. So environmental injustice is when we can't all enjoy these different amenities and the different physical pieces of the environment, and we're bearing more than our share of a disparity that's being caused by the environment, versus when you go on the other side of town, it looks very, very, very different. That's an injustice, and I will look at this as a human right as well, from my sense, okay, and in respect to my own research. And so when we get to the justice part, that means that we are all, whatever the bearing is of this environment, we're all bearing that same share. There's no unequalness to this. It's very important for all of us, no matter what your race is, no matter where you're living at, no matter who you are, because it affects everybody really economically, whether you know it or not. People look to economics because many times when people feel like it doesn't affect them. Well, this doesn't affect me because I live over here and I have this great neighborhood. I have this great whatever. I'm good. That is for those people over there. But when you look at different public policies that are implemented or are not implemented, when you look at things that are being invested in, that takes money, or the lack of investment, that takes money. When things have to be fixed in certain areas, that also takes money. That is connected also to your public policy and may impact the economy as well. And so we all should be very cognizant of our environment, because even if it's not you feel like it's not affecting you directly, I can guarantee you it's affecting somebody in your family, it's affecting employees, it's affecting somebody you're connected with, it's affecting public policy. it's connected to your pocket. I don't want to say your pocketbook because everybody doesn't carry a pocketbook, but your money. And so it's definitely a domino and trickle effect.
I want to take it just a step further, because we talked about environmental justice policy at the beginning, you and Lindsay, and I asked you about environmental justice and why it's important. But one of the things I've realized is that environmental justice policy is something that we should pay a whole lot of attention to, but it's just not sexy. How do we make it sexy so people could actually pay attention to it? And the reason I'm asking is because we just had one of the most important rollbacks in our fight for environmental justice, and that of the endangerment findings.
Mm-hmm.
And this should be something that should be alarming for everybody, but it doesn't seem like it's really getting any traction. And so I'm just wondering, how do we make this void sexy so
Mm-hmm.
that people could actually fill this void?
Right. I think I'm just going to say from my experience. So when we look at different administrations, we know that these different administrations have different political ideologies, I would say, right? Of course. So your Obama administration and his regulation is different from your Bush, is different from your Trump, of course, is different from your Biden. And all of them have they come in with these different agendas and how they see the environment. Sometimes it happens through executive orders. We know Biden put in a whole lot of executive orders. Obama put in certain ones. We know that Trump came in and he pulled them back, of course, and he put in his own EOs. And then you have your different regulations of your rollback from that president and what his administration is and what he sees, whatever his political ideology is. And so understanding that when we look at these rollbacks, when we specifically, and what you're talking about, Reverend, and that is connected to this particular administration and, you know, whatever his political ideology is, there are different specifics of why he's doing these different things. In order for this to be, you know, sexy, if you will, or to be, you know, attractive to the not communities as a whole, but I'll just say the nation as a whole, it has to be understood and how it impacts different populations. And I always use the, you know, economy and how the industry has to feel as though this is going to impact them, how the population is going to feel like it's going to impact them, how academia is going to feel like it's going to impact them. And no matter how much money you have or you don't have, how is this going to impact how is it going to impact you? If we're rolling back certain regulations, such as, I'm just going to say the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Resource Conservation Recovery Act, if we're rolling back different regulations, how does that impact your neighborhood specifically and your children when they are going to school, when they're going outside? How is it impacting, you know, your partner? How is it impacting employees? Do you have to have more health insurance now? How much is it going to cost your employees for health insurance now? Because now this is connected to, you know, the environment. If I am making a certain amount of money and I feel like, hey, my air is good, I'm cool. But guess what? Now this is still connected to my employees and they're in health insurance. And so now it's going to cost them more money as well. So I think that we have to look at it in a way, and that's such a great question because I always feel like the environment doesn't get enough media attention in the way it needs to be, the way it needs to be placed out there, so people understand that it's really a part of everyday life, and people really put the environment like in somewhere out over there where it's something very pristine that doesn't connect to us. So I think that with the example of the, you know, the regulation rollbacks, there has to be an education and a connection into the way where it people understand that it impacts your employees, it impacts you and your company, it impacts the population, it impacts, you know, your energy bills going up, it impacts all of us in different ways. It has to become very personal so people understand it personally, because most people don't understand some of these regulations, how they affect us, and then they may feel like it's not going to impact you. So I think it has to be placed out and educated in that way, educated to the public in that way, I would say.
And you talked about your personal journey, LaToria. You talked about some of the things that kind of got you to where you are and ways you wanted to educate yourself, expose yourself to certain things. And it sounds like, after leaving the CDC and getting your PhD, that you were looking for a way to be able to say more, is what I heard.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so I'm curious, as you just discussed, as Rev was asking, how do we make this more sexy? How do we make it so it's more personal? How have you been able to take your learnings into the classroom, some of the HBCUs where you're teaching, and help support the next generation in finding their personal connection to public health and EJ to impact their communities?
So, thank you for that question too, Lindsay. So at Spelman, I teach environmental politics and policy, and I integrate environmental justice into that. And I teach the legislative process. And so with environmental politics and policy, what I'm doing is, they're learning regulation. They're learning how regulations are created, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm also placing them in real life situations where they understand not just a theory, but they understand real life. So they understand the political climate and what's happening right now. They have what we call White House reports. And it's funny because the Reverend asked about the endangerment findings and regulations. They had a question on that and how that impacts marginalized populations, right? And so they're getting these real life questions, but at the end of the semester, they're also being these people. So they have a real life historical environmental justice case that happened during the Clinton administration. And so they have these group projects, and you are the federal government, you are the state government, you are that industry, and you are you are the EPA. And so they debate and they understand these issues, and they write a term paper and all this good stuff. And so with that, I know that does well for the students because I can't get rid of them. I shouldn't say that, but they
love you
call
for a reason.
they call forever and they email forever, and it's a good thing because and I also I connect EJ to everything. I connect EJ to people who are in prison right now, populations that are in prison, the Black population specifically that are in prison, and the environmental pieces that the environmental disparities that they're going through right now in prison. I connected to the critical race theory and, how do you connect that to environmental injustice and policy and the implication of that? And so the other day, I was talking about the critical race theory, and one of my students, they learned about that in my environmental policy class, and they wrote about it in the Brookings Institute. And I was so proud of that because I was like, because I remember him talking to me about it and saying he was going to write about it, and he published it. I was like, oh, he was in my class. That's awesome. And so what I'm doing is I'm teaching them these real life pieces, and whoever you want to be, whatever you want to do when you get out of here in connection to this, I want you to understand what you're getting into, but I want you to advance it in a way that feels, right for you. And that's how I teach the class. I do a legislative process, in the same way. Let's talk about Jasmine Crockett. How does that look to you in your view, as a person who may want to be in Congress, and how does that impact marginalized populations when we talk about the legislative process? And so with that, with Spelman, I teach those classes in that way. With Clark Atlanta University, when I worked at CDC, we were able to partner with CAU for the first time in the childhood-led poisoning prevention program. And I brought students over to CDC for a summertime program where they partner with epidemiologists. And these are poli-sci majors, these are health majors, these are business majors, because environmental justice is everything, right? It's all of those things. And I teach that in that way too. And so they're coming over, they're sitting with epidemiologists, they're learning GIS, and we're taking that back to CAU. They're creating their maps, and understanding, and they can also integrate that in their career as well. And so that's the way I do that in academia. And it keeps me, in a forward thinking mode. I have to know what's going on politically to be able to come into the classroom and tell them to, teach them to try to advance what we call environmental justice. And I do it in that way. And a sense of that is a sense of freedom for me to be able to say what I want to say and do what I want to do to an extent, because I'm still representing, a college. But my consulting firm, the LS Whitehead Group, is all of these things that I've experienced. And that's just my baby, my
Well,
consulting firm.
that was actually the next thing I was going to ask you, and this will
Oh,
probably be my
okay.
last question to you. But so
Okay.
you talked about, where you've come from, your family, where you lived, and talked about, your first job, talked about your PhD, talked about you teaching at HBCUs, and how you wanted a sense of, freedom and ability to be able to say and do what you want to say. So I know you're still teaching, but could you tell us a little bit about your consultancy firm and how you see that fitting into like your overall contribution into the environmental justice and public health space?
Thank you. So LS Whitehead Group, LSWG, I created the consulting firm actually in my last year of my PhD in 2011, right before I attained the PhD. And I wanted to have something else. I was still working at the CDC, but this is a way that I can help people. And another way I can do some side consultations, when it comes to the environment. I didn't know initially like what that would look like. I just knew what I knew. I just knew that I can help people with public policy, and environmental justice. So over the years, I mean, now I am working full time in my firm, but before getting to this space, LSWG was created to do exactly that. When people are in their community, they don't understand who to call. Do I call the CDC? Do I call the EPA? Do I call the Environmental Protection Agency? Do I call the environmental local health department because something is wrong here? We give them the research to say, okay, this is what's happening. This is who you call. This is the nearest community-based organization. Because usually it's a leader that I'm really connected with in a community-based organization. And when I say leader, that leader has their own organization, their own community-based organization, right? And so what we've done basically is we are really equipping people through research, through understanding public policy, through understanding how politicians have voted on certain pieces of the environment the years to come, and what's the chance of how they're going to vote on that bill if it comes down the line again. Who do you call? Who's your congressperson? So we're equipping them with these pieces, through that type of mechanism. And we also do that, for government as well. And so when I originally designed LSWG, it was to do that, to do the research, to say, hey, here you go. Here's the research. This is what's happening. This is the disparity of this issue. I'm going to give you all the scientific pieces, policy pieces. And they want to know after that, well, what can we do? And that's when I come in as well. I'm consulting them on what they can do. And so fast forward now, after leaving the CDC, I actually worked for a corporate company for 2 years, and I was laid off last year. And through that layoff, I learned a lot through corporate. I had never worked for a corporate company, and they hired me specifically to do consulting specifically on environmental justice and to create this mechanism, this machine of EJ that can run through the entire company. So I'm like, oh yeah, I could do that. Okay, cool. So, but I was laid off. So after being laid off, I'm trying to figure out, my next role. Like, oh, what do I do? Where do I go? And I discovered that LSWG, it is my role, but I'm going to do it full time. And so learning everything that I've learned at CDC, the scientific, piece of that, being a public health advisor, overseeing states, understanding public policy at Clark Atlanta University, political science, understanding politicians and the political ideology of all these different pieces, how that works, the academia piece, all of that is LSWG
Mm-hmm.
now full time. And so we, of course, create webinars when people need webinars. We create, educational pieces, as well. We do research for politicians when they don't know how to vote on certain pieces. Hey, this is something that's coming down the line for me. Give me some research on this. And then we give them the research, and then they want talking points because they want to understand, they want people to, know that they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And they do after we give them the research, but they may not know what to say. That's not their language, and that's okay. So we're giving them talking points as well. And then the latest project that we've done has been for Mayor Andre Dickens for the city of Atlanta. So what we've done for the city of Atlanta, we created a climate vulnerability risk assessment, but we conducted this from an environmental and a climate justice lens. So what does that look like? That goes beyond if a Katrina happened right now in Atlanta, what would happen to your neighborhood? What would happen to my neighborhood? So we're looking at the most at-risk neighborhoods. And we are having the city of Atlanta understand, and in collaboration with the, of course, Sustainability and Resilience Office for the city of Atlanta, we are looking at those 10 most at-risk neighborhoods and those different activities that they may be undergoing, those different risks to those neighborhoods. But we went beyond that. So when we say we want to look at this from an environmental and climate justice lens, we are looking at historical redlining. You have neighborhoods that were, that were kept out, that were created to be over there, to be in disparity. Those same neighborhoods are 5 of the neighborhoods that we looked at 10 at most risk neighborhoods. 5 of those neighborhoods that were historically redlined in the 1930s are still at risk now today. That's not, news to us, of course,
On
right?
purpose.
And on purpose. So we went back in this climate vulnerability risk assessment from an EJ and CJ lens to say, okay, let's look at housing for the city of Atlanta. Let's look at transportation for the city of Atlanta. Let's look at voting, the way people voted in these neighborhoods. Let's look at healthcare, of course. Let's look at food insecurity. So we took Atlanta's social, cultural, built, and political environment, and we took that history, and we also applied that in a climate vulnerability assessment, and we also gave recommendations. And so the city of Atlanta, the mayor, they will be talking about these recommendations in their first climate resilience plan that came from LSWG. And our website is going to be up next month in March. We will also be displaying the maps that we created for the mayor's office. We will be displaying these recommendations and things, just the research as well, scientifically. But that's a product that I'm very, very proud of, because again, that's a holistic, and environmental justice is holistic. It's an umbrella, it's all of these different things, and it's a domino effect. And that's what that assessment looks like. So when we talk about these pieces of the environment, Lindsay, you and I know, you and I in the Reverend know, all these things can't be separated. You can't separate food insecurity from bad air and water. You can't separate that from racial residential segregation and education and voting. It's all together. So that's the climate vulnerability risk assessment from an EJ lens that we just finished. So that's what LSWG does. We advance environmental justice, climate justice, and health equity.
I gotta say, LaToria, Dr. Whitehead, I'll call you officially. I have truly enjoyed everything that you shared today.
I'm so glad.
You got me tired, honey, listening to all the things you've done after all these years. I mean, you are truly, when we talk about subject matter experts, we talk about people who are passionate about the work, about the cause, who take it seriously. Like, I think of someone like you. And that's why I was so glad to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Your wealth of experience and your heart for this work is helps me get up, because this work is not easy. There are a lot of things working against us, so I just want to say thank you to you for your time today.
No,
and
thank
for,
you.
of course, and for sharing about your expertise and all the experiences that you've had, and really excited to hear about LS Whitehead Group as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And Rev, I'm gonna pass back to you.
Thank you, Lizzie. Listen, people power, and the people. You know how much we care about you by the quality of guests that we bring before you. And you need to know that we brought you an expert above experts who is walking history. And so we thank you.
I'm so humbled.
Dr. Whitehead. One of the things that you have emphasized that I really want people to hear plainly is that EJ is holistic. Environmental justice is holistic. we need to look at environmental justice as all things that pertain to us, all
Yes.
things that are in our environment. So when we look at these payday loan places, that's an environmental justice issue.
Yep.
When we look at our lack of access to mobility, that's an environmental
Mm-hmm.
justice issue. When we look at having more fast food restaurants in our community, that we have fresh food sources in our community,
Yes.
beloved, that's an environmental justice issue. The things that many of us fight against, not just the hunger. I mean, that's great that we have food pantries and we have food lines and we're able to provide for people nourishing their bodies, but also protecting their bodies is extremely important. What I heard and Doc, what got me into this movement was
Mm-hmm.
hearing Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley. He
Okay.
said, how can I preach to them in the pulpit, shout them in my pews, but they can't breathe in public? And that resonated with me. It
Mm-hmm.
was something that made me start speaking against environmental injustices and
Mm-hmm.
advocating for environmental justice. And then I meet just, tremendous people like you all, tremendous brains like you all, and I just become a sponge to learn even more. But it's for me to take those tools or
Yes.
take those lessons and use the tools that I have, which is my voice. I tell Lindsay all the time, you put it all together. All I'm good for is just running my mouth and telling stories. But it's for me to
Yes.
take those tools, take the influence,
Yes.
take the voice that I have and speak about the practical issues
Yes.
that's concerning our people.
Yes.
The fact that your bill, your energy bill is higher than giraffe booty ought to be important to me.
Yes. Absolutely.
The
Exactly.
fact that these data
Yes.
centers that we have coming to our communities are competing with our drinking water should be important to us.
Yes.
The
Exactly.
fact that our children not only go to bed hungry, but they wake up with infected lungs because of the air that they breathe right outside their doorstep should be important to us.
Yes.
All
Absolutely.
of these are environmental justice issues. So thank you, Doc. Thank you
Yes.
for just being that expert and standing in the gap and helping us preachers and us other folk who just good at running our mouths to get this information so we can put it out to the people. Thank you for
And
helping us to gain power.
no, and I want to say something to you all. I am so grateful for what you do. I'm so grateful for this podcast. I'm so grateful for you, the Reverend. I'm so grateful for you, Lindsay. I am so grateful for your brilliant work and talking about these issues, like you said, that affects us, Reverend Malcolm, and that affects us, as you said, Lindsay. I'm just so grateful for the podcast. And I am, whatever you need me to do in the background, however, I am here. I'm grateful for you all. And I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for having me. I'm so very humble to both of you. Thank you. I'm humble.
Thank you.
We're grateful for you too. Thank you.
Yes. All right, people, good people. We out of here. And as always, I offer to you love, peace, and light.